No, and there's been a lot of misinformation out there.
Idea, which is just chucking toothbrushes out of airplanes. Hey, Pierre Polyev.
WTF. Here, here.
Vassy will confront the health minister and talk about the capital gains taxes and dental care. And the capital gains tax is a hot item here, and he's going to go through disinformation. Let's have a look at Vassy cutting this guy up.
Canadian dental care plan with coverage set to start in just days. Starting in May, eligible seniors are expected to have access, but questions remain about whether the program will work. The plan aims to provide coverage for low and middle income Canadians who don't have dental insurance already, and details were announced late last year. So far, 1.7 million seniors have signed up, but there have been concerns over whether enough dentists will enroll. In response, the feds have since announced providers can instead bill insurance companies directly without formally signing a contract. Meanwhile, there are new worries in the medical community, however, when it comes to recently announced capital gains tax changes proposed in the latest federal budget. The change would increase the taxable portion of capital gains above $250,000 from 50 to 67% for individuals and for all corporations and trusts without that $250,000 threshold. Now, many doctors are warning the change could undermine the retirement plans because so many of them incorporated their medical practices years ago. This week, the Prime Minister dismissed those concerns.
So yes, we are asking the most successful in this country to do a little bit more to make sure that everyone can see themselves in the success of this country.
Faced with this on top of our already morally defeated and beleaguered physician workforce coming out of the pandemic. This is really, it feels a little bit like a beatdown, I guess.
Here to talk more about all of that is Federal Health Minister Mark Holland. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Vassy.
I want to start off, Minister, on those capital gains changes. Doctors through the Canadian Medical Association and many of its provincial offshoots are saying your government's tax hike in that respect is going to drive them out of the country. Are you willing to address their concerns and make changes, or are you sticking with this tax increase no matter what?
Well, I think that, when I'm talking to doctors, the changes that are made still, and I think this is very important, maintain their ability to incorporate and the many tax advantages therein, and the fact that the first $250,000 that they'll earn every year has that benefit that capital gains have of not having a tax on that first 50%, and then it moves from 50% to a 1/3 advantage. So they're maintaining that. That's an incredibly important advantage. And we want, obviously, to work with them to make sure that, and I know they care deeply about this, fairness with it is existing within the country as a whole, that we're making investments in things like healthcare and that there's a health system that's there.
Everything he's talking about was in Canada before the Liberals came in. It's not like they invented any of this. They do have to pay for health care from the taxes and give it back to the provinces. And now the interest payment is even higher than the health care, which is something of Trudeau's fault and Jagmeet Singh for propping him up, keeping him in for another year and a half so he can get his pension. Yeah, that looks like what it is, but also to keep this escapade of money moving around and no one can keep track of it. And they keep talking about us like some entrepreneur or some business thing. This is really going to hurt entrepreneurs in Canada and people and leaders. So let's continue.
They're working in that is working well for them and for their patients. So I think that these are fair changes. There's still a lot of tax advantages accrued to them that will be maintained and continue.
But are you sure about the ones that you specified that will be maintained? Because the point that they've made is that governments 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in exchange for not increasing their fees by as much, said, incorporate, you're going to have that tax advantage available to you. That threshold you detailed, the $250,000, in the changes your government's introducing in this budget does not apply to corporations and trusts. It only applies to capital gains for an individual. So how are they maintaining it? Their sense is that they're not, and it actually will greatly impact those who have used their corporation as a vehicle for retirement.
No, and there's been a lot of misinformation out there. Let's be clear: the advantages around incorporation continue; those aren't changing. The changes deal with capital gains, and on capital gains, you maintain that big tax advantage on your first 50% of your capital gains.
But not if you're a corporation.
Yeah, well, no, because your incorporated benefits, all those benefits that accrue to you as a incorporated entity, there's still huge advantages to that, and they continue. So there's, I think that when folks actually look at what those changes are and how they affect things, that it isn't nearly as big an impact as some is being made out to, and that for folks who are making, over $250,000 a year in their retirement, one of the things that we're saying is that, we need to have a system that's fair. We want to make sure that everybody is participating and has equal opportunities, and that we all have to be partners in that.
We all need to be partners. What is Trudeau make, $400,000 a year now? That doesn't seem like a very equal partner. Maybe that salary should be lowered, and maybe they should pay more or just do less and stop sticking their nose in provincial matters. Because it seems like the Liberals don't know what to do with themselves. They just have to stick their face in everyone's business, and everyone has to be an activist. And this is so frustrating with the Liberals, but that's the way of, one world Canada government, or a controlled government, like a communist government. That's what it's like. Let's move on.
And it's clear that those that are earning the most have seen huge gains, capital gains in their real estate holdings, their stock holdings, in their other assets. And so we're saying that, part of being in a society where we make sure that everybody does well is that we ask those who are making the most to.
Do Canadians, though, intimate from what you just said that doctors, for example, are lucky that they have been able to earn more? I mean, doctors' mental health has greatly suffered since the pandemic. They endured a lot during it. When you say they make more than $250,000, I mean, many of them, primarily those 2/3 who have incorporated, are having to pay their staff, all their overhead. It's not like they're walking home with $250,000 all the time. Are you insinuating that those doctors are not paying their fair share, and that your government is now going to force them to in order to subsidize the programs that you've determined are necessary?
Not at all. No. I'm deeply appreciative of the work that doctors do and nurses do, personal support care workers. The work that's done by everybody in our health system is absolutely extraordinary. I talk every day about how appreciative I am of that work. What I'm saying is that that those that are making the most have seen their assets and have seen their wealth expand enormously.
But didn't they work for those assets? Didn't they work for that wealth?
Sure, of course they work for their assets. But look, we can choose what kind of society we live in. Do we want to be in communities where there are huge discrepancies, where fairness and it doesn't exist, where nurses aren't able to, as an example, be able to afford to live, or do we make investments to make sure that there's fairness, that everybody has access and opportunity to a great life, so that we don't have the kinds of tensions that we see that come from enormous disparity.
And I do understand the concept, but I think it's also predicated on the assumption that your government's investments and spending will essentially lead to that equality and lead to that fairness. Much of what you're spending, for example, the billions on housing, maybe could have been mitigated if your government had recognized the scale and severity of the housing crisis much earlier. You've grown the public service by 40%. You've grown consulting by 60%. You're basically asking, Canadians to pay more, to offer more equality to people, which I think most Canadians would agree with, but predicated on an idea I'm not sure everyone can subscribe to, that the stuff that you're doing is going to work.
Well, I mean, you're asking me to answer for everything, and so I can try to take each of the items that you mentioned, Vassy. Let's start with the housing crisis. 10 years ago, the federal government wasn't in housing at all. It was considered a provincial and a municipal issue. Our government put our hands up and said, we've got to get in here. The problem is too big. We can't allow this to just be a provincial or municipal issue. There were no investments, zero investments. And then when you talk about consulting, I mean, one of the things that's disingenuous about that conversation conversation is that in order to make sure that when you have a pandemic and you need to scale up, or when something happens that is temporary in nature, you use consulting as a way to temporarily adjust your workforce.
I mean, with respect, consulting was going up before the pandemic.
So the idea that there are, there are non-critical investments. I mean, you look at what we did for the Canada Child Benefit and the hundreds of thousands of children that lift up to out of poverty, or the Canada Workers Benefit, all of these different, or how we were there for people during the pandemic and businesses during the pandemic. If we don't make these investments, bad things happen.
Let me, in that vein, then ask you about the dental program that's about to launch, and in particular.
And even the $10 a day daycare, you've heard, 6 years now? The Liberal government is not paying the daycares on time, and they're opting out of the program because the Liberals don't have the money managed properly. It's just going out the door so fast, and with interest rate payments, billions disappearing, they just don't know where it goes anymore. That's really the issue, what's going on. With every program, there's a failure. Every single one, except weed, which after 9 years looks like it's finally gotten on track, but it was horrible. I mean, the government is selling drugs. It's that hard to actually make that work. It just seems unbelievable that even selling narcotics and they still can't get it right. That's crazy. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. It's going to be a little bit more to this video, and we'll talk then.
Particular concerns that have been raised about the number of providers who have signed up. I think the last information we have from your government is that it was about 5,000. 1.7 million patients are eligible for coverage very shortly. I think math is not my strong suit, but I did the math. That's 340 new patients for each dentist. Do you think it is viable that all of these new patients will actually have the coverage that they believe they will have after having signed up?
Well, we've always said this is going to be iterative. It's why we're rolling out in cohorts, and very excited about the, as you mentioned, well over 5,000 dentists that have signed up through the existing sign up. We've also created a new portal that'll be eligible on July 8th, where any office can just participate on a one-off basis, or always use it on a one-off basis. I can tell you every single day I'm meeting with dentists and hygienists and denturists, and we're growing the number of participants. And I'm very confident that we're going to get there. But like healthcare, like when we were first rolling out healthcare in this country, it's not going to be without its bumps. This is the largest federal government program that has ever been rolled out. And so there's eventually going to be 9 million people there. And every day we're going to be adding thousands and thousands of new people who are getting coverage, many of whom might have never seen an oral health professional. So it will be iterative, but the conversations with the dentists and the dental associations are going very well.
So let me ask you kind of a logistical question, because I imagine a lot of those seniors in particular are watching right now. If in fact they are eligible and they feel that they're about to get dental services and they try and they're having issues, like what should they do if it doesn't come easy?
Well, the first thing I would say, take a look at all your options. In many cases, a dental hygienist is a great option. I talk to dental hygienists who are very much have open books of business, really looking for patients. So you should look at all of the dental options that are available to you, and to get that appointment, at the very beginning, it may take a little bit more time, and we want to be clear about that. But we have a whole bunch of new folks that are signing up every day, and on July 8th, that's going to be a big day. That's where the alternative pathway is coming in. So there's going to be more and more and more participation in the plan. So, for folks who never had coverage, many seniors their entire life, they've never had coverage. It may require a little bit of patience, but not too much. And to go from zero, from that zero of 9 million people covered to get to that full 9 million. And it's going to be a process of continual improvement every day.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vassy.